And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Laraib, as we are here breaking down week 2 of the NFL season. We were filming this on Wednesday night, around 8:30, so lines may subject to change. We're still getting news on certain injuries and roster developments at this moment. Most notably San Francisco, but we'll talk to that whenever we get to it. Um, Biggest thing, and we kind of talked about this before we started filming, week 2 is always the trickiest week, right? Because you only have such a small sample size from week 1 of a single game that, a team could have just had a bad start. They're implementing a new game plan or a new coach, new quarterback, getting their rhythm together, a brand new offensive line, and things can just change. Or maybe a team you thought was really good played another good team that you thought was pretty bad, and then they play a worse team, and I don't know. It just a lot can change, but also a lot of questions can be answered in week 2, and we will attempt to answer those prematurely. Laura, how are we feeling about this week 2 slate?
I'm feeling good. I think you and I are going to disagree on a lot of these
Oh, I
games
can't
here.
wait. There's gonna be one in particular. You're gonna think I'm
I, I,
crazy.
I'm just, I mean, I went crazy this week. That's all I can really tell you. I'm excited. Like you mentioned, how things change from week 1 to week 2, how teams, offensive line specifically, they start to gel, how new coordinators, offensively, defensively, they start to gel, how, regular starters like Reek Woolen, start getting benched because of their play for the past 2 seasons. Different things like that, really, pivot you one way or the other.
Stone
So
Forsythe not being on your offensive line.
yeah, just small little changes like that can have huge impacts throughout the season and week to week, Lewis. But let's go ahead and start off week 2 here with the Jacksonville Jaguars going to Cincinnati to play the Bengals. And just a Cincinnati team who should be 0-1 somehow finds its way to being 1-0. The Bengals favored by 3.5 in this one, Lewis, and I'm leaning the other way in Jacksonville. I mean, this one's not a shock. I have to pick an upset. I really like what I saw out of Jacksonville now. Because this is right here off the bat. They played the Panthers last week. Anything that we saw, I don't know if it's fool's gold,
Bengals played the
but
Browns.
the Bengals exactly played the Browns and they looked like garbage. It's too early in our recording for me to use any profanity right now, but they looked like complete garbage. And they should have lost that game if it wasn't for their kicker Schmidt, who played like another S word. And so Jacksonville, Liam Cohen came out and said Travis Hunter is going to be playing more of the defensive side of the ball in this game, which makes sense when you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who went for a combined 80 yards last week. Another slow start from Cincinnati, and I think continues in week 2.
Yeah, this has just always been a tough spot for the Bengals. It's only their fault. At least what I can say about the Bengals is they did find a way to win. I don't even want to call
I
it
think the
that.
Browns just found a way to lose.
Yes, all right, that's definitely the more appropriate verbiage there. But as the Bengals, maybe it's just a sense of relief. All right, the first one's out of the way. We're coming back home, which really you're staying in Ohio. Um, and the Jaguars, like you mentioned, coming off an impressive win. The thing that I'm looking forward to the most in this game is this Bengals passing offense, right? I mean, the Browns, you could at least say have respectable names in defense. Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett looked like a man amongst boys out there, just doing whatever he wanted to that Bengals offensive line. And you know, with Joe Burrow in this passing offense, obviously they're prolific. Obviously they have all the tools at their disposal to be a prolific passing offense. So it won't surprise me if they come out next week and Jamar Chase has 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he looks like Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins is back, and Joe Burrow is slinging like he is. So I'm not going to go super overreactionary to week 1. I think the Bengals at home, they have a tough schedule. And if you think the Bengals are going to be a decent team this year, this is a game on their schedule they need to win. So maybe it's my bias that I do have the Bengals as a playoff team. And my preseason analysis would lead me to this is a game they need to win on their schedule. But as for Jacksonville, there's things working in their favor in this game. I think their pass rush looked outstanding against the Panthers, who I'll say the Panthers still have talent on the offensive line. Like to be able to really bottle up that run game for the most part, cause a lot of pressure in Bryce Young. I think, what we saw from the Bengals offensive line, if the Jaguars can get that pass rush, get Joe Burrow off kilter, and really, force him into a lot of third and long situations, a lot of uncomfortability, then I think that's going to play in their favor. For me, it's I just still don't quite trust this Jaguars offense, notably their running game. I think the Bengals defensive front is better, not much better, but better than the Panthers defensive front. And I just don't think, you get Trevor Lawrence in the pressure situations. Is he going to perform like the way I think Joe Burrow will? I do think this is a closer game, and have the Jaguars covering here slightly, but I am picking the Bengals to win this one 27-24. I just think it's going to be a really entertaining game. It's going to tell us a lot about these two teams.
Yeah, I'm also going to go 27-24, but I'm going to lean in the favor of Jacksonville. If Bazooka Joe can drop 300 yards on this Bengals secondary, I think Trevor Lawrence and this new Liam Cohen offense with Brian Thomas Jr., with Travis Hunter, and Travis Etienne, who I expect to get a lot of receiving work in this game after what we saw Dylan Sampson do last week. I think they're going to be able to keep pace. What I originally thought that Panthers game from last week against the Jaguars was going to be, high flying, high scoring game with a lot of offense. I'm hoping this game turns into that, but I think Jacksonville pulls off the upset, and the Cincinnati Bengals are left scratching their head once again in week two.
Can I get a Duval?
Duval.
Yikes. Well, if they win 2-0, you'll get a very passionate Duval from me come Tuesday's episode. Moving on next, Laraib, we have the Chicago Bears traveling to Detroit. Both teams 0-1. Starting off in week two. Both disappointing reasons for totally different reasons. The Bears just utterly collapse their offense and defense both in that fourth quarter against the Vikings on Monday Night Football. And the Lions just start to finish get boat raced, against the Packers in Green Bay last week. Um, Again, this game's going to tell us a lot about these two teams, right? We knew there would be an adjustment period with the two new coordinators in Detroit, with the new offensive line in Detroit. And thankfully for Detroit, I do like the Chicago Bears front, but it's nowhere near the front that the Packers defense imposed last week. So really, you need to start with what is your identity? And under Dan Campbell, it's been running the ball. We saw the Vikings in that second half, notably in that fourth quarter, really establish that running game. Jordan Mason just powering really tough yards. And that's, Detroit's bread and butter. It's establishing the run, setting up the play action pass, and getting these guys in space. And this, Bears secondary already, Jalen Johnson still don't know his status going into the week, and they just kept dropping corners in that game until you just saw, Adam Thielen on a 2-point conversion just by himself in the red zone, right? So I don't really trust this Bears defense. Dennis Allen still has a lot to figure out with the scheme over there. I think the Detroit offense will get back to the powerhouse. Now, I don't think it's still a divisional game, but they are, pissed off, something to prove. I always like kind of the more motivational coaches off a loss, especially a guy like Dan Campbell. And this Detroit team, which has high expectations, this is a game they need to win at home, get their mojo back, get their groove back. And for the Bears, you could say the same thing, right? Excuse me. Really, sorry. There we go. Really disappointing outcome in that last game. And it just feels like the vibes, going from that big story that I was mentioning in our last episode about Caleb Williams and the offseason distractions, Ryan Poles, and then to have all that positive outlook and just the fallout from Bears fans this past week has just been dread. Like, hey, you lost a close game against a divisional team that won 14 games last year, and they're acting like the sky is falling. Like, slow it down. I just think the expectations are a little too high in Chicago. I think Detroit takes advantage of that. I like Detroit in this matchup.
Yeah, and I have to agree. If there's any team that we're going to see a lot of gelling from, it has to be this Lions team, right? We no more Frank Ragnow, a rookie guard coming in on the right side, two new coordinators. It was going to take some time for them to finally, get in a groove. And what better spot here against a Bears team who is just downtrodden, and especially from a game from Caleb Williams where he didn't look the most impressive, didn't have the greatest of accuracy. And now you have a rookie head coach in Ben Johnson who He's motivated in him in a, his own right to beat this Lions team. But let's not act like this Lions team also didn't hear the noise from the offseason. Oh, you're not going to be anything without Ben Johnson. You're not going to be anything without Aaron Glenn. So I think both of these teams are going to be motivated to win. I just like the construction of this Lions team better. I think Aiden Hutchinson is the game breaker that can just completely flip the game on its head. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown to have a huge bounce back game in this one. He's been historically known to dominate a team in the Chicago Bears. And then Caleb Williams and just the vibes around him. I mean, it's just not looking good in Chicago right now. I think the Lions in a good spot here. Lay the wood down on the Bears. I like them to win at 30-20.
Yeah, and that's kind of the big storyline going into this game, right? It's the Ben Johnson reunion going back to Detroit. He's probably been thinking about this game all off season long, and to now have this opportunity to go up against his team, there might be some trickery, some chicanery in the first quarter. Maybe the Bears go up to a lead, so maybe the sharp thing is to pivot, right? To if the Bears go up to the lead, maybe some Lions money line. If you were sharp like me and picked the Vikings money line, then maybe you were pretty happy on Monday Night Football. Um, but ultimately, I just think that the talent mismatch is way too big, and I think Detroit needs this game. They're going to get this game. I agree. It's going to be a big game by the Lions. I'm going to go 31-17. Lions pull off the impressive get back. But let's go ahead, Laraib. Let's move on to your Seattle Seahawks traveling to Pittsburgh. Seattle needing a win 0-1 against the 1-0 Steelers. The Seahawks are the 2.5 point underdogs. Well, it was 1.5 when I looked at it earlier. Laraib, strictly from this game, was the 4 touchdown Aaron Rodgers dynamo a sign of things to come for this game? Or was it a flash in the pan? Here comes a real team. Get ready to face the music, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think Mr. Rogers, aka Mr. Bacchus, had his fill, got to go to New York, got to throw his four
Marcus.
touchdowns, and he's going to be fat and happy after winning that game. And on the other side, the Seahawks team, who is pissed off, who's hearing a lot of noise, Clint Kubiak especially, Tariq Woolen, or say Reek Woolen, half the player since he changed his name to Reek. He's going to be benched, and it looks like Josh Jobe is going to be taking over his spot. I love the Seahawks in this spot. I think the Steelers defense got ran all over last week by Justin Fields, by Breece Hall, by Braylon Allen, and I think the Seahawks team is going to get back to their identity in establishing the run. It was it was a really tough week against the 49ers team who knows you really well, who has a game record in Joey Bosa. But I
Yep.
just saw TJ Watt last week get boxed up by rookie Armand Membu. I think he's gonna be. I don't. I mean, I'm gonna eat my crow on Thursday when I say he's gonna be a non-factor in this game. But I think that's what's gonna happen. I think the Seahawks team is gonna start to. This is another team that needs to gel, right? New offensive coordinator, rookie Gray Zabel in the offensive line position. Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas are healthy at the right. Finally playing together. This is a team that needs to gel and get used to the zone scheme that Kubiak likes to run. I think Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker are going to run wild in this one. And I really hope Clint Kubiak heard some of the noise. This Seahawks team, Lewis, had three, three play action plays against the 49ers last week. And that is just not going to work for Sam Darnold. That was his bread and butter in Minnesota. And I really hope we get to see some of that in this one. Now, there's a revenge written everywhere in this game. DK Metcalf going back against his former team in the Seahawks. Jalen Ramsey, who is well known against the Seahawks team. This is going to be a fun game, a defensive battle. But with Rick Woolen not out there, I really like the Seahawks' chances.
This is a very interesting game, just purely matchup wise. You mentioned the Pittsburgh defense just got ran over all last week. And it was pretty shocking, right? Because we know this Pittsburgh defense, we know all the guys, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, obviously. They have this reputation of being a stalwart defensive team. And it's really like, what do you trust more in this matchup? Like, ultimately, there's the feeling inside, the hatred I have for Aaron Rodgers, and seeing him succeed just made me my skin crawl last week. But it's Mike Tomlin back at home. I just did not like what I saw from the Seahawks approach offensively. And you mentioned it, like just the lack of play action. That's what Sam Darnold was so successful with last year. With we would kind of both argue a lesser running game in Minnesota last year. Now their offensive line was better and more established, but that was the thing about the Seahawks all off season was getting the tackles back healthy, bringing in the pieces on the interior of the offensive line, really assuring this run game. And both the running backs, just didn't look that impressive. And then ultimately, Sam Darnold, the new system, just couldn't come through at the end with the fumble. Nick Bosa recovers it, and it wasn't. It was a teammate that kind of dislodged the ball out of his arm. Um, I I've been battling with this one. I'm not gonna lie to you, Laraib. But I'm gonna end up going with the Pittsburgh Steelers here, and ultimately it's a belief in Mike Tomlin over really over Mike Macdonald. And Mike Macdonald has a history. You mentioned revenge games and just matchups through his time with Baltimore. Not a long time, but a very productive time. But the team that always kind of gave him fits was the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it was just being able to run the ball, being consistent. Now, they didn't run the ball very effectively against New York last week, and this Seattle defense actually did a really good job of bottling up the run against against San Francisco last week. Chris McCaffrey had the gaudy numbers, but most of that came in the receiving game. So, at least fantasy wise, sorry, that's all my brain goes to with some of these skill players. So, I don't. It's going to be a lot on Aaron Rodgers, a lot on DK Metcalf. He's going to want to get his. Now, can he have the mental fortitude not to punch Devin Witherspoon in the face in the first quarter and get kicked out? Because that's all Mike Macdonald and hell, even what's the GM's name? It's eluding me
John
right now.
Schneider.
That's all John Schneider's. Hey, you just start talking and he'll go out crazy. They know him. They know all of his ticks, all of his set offs. But ultimately, I think this Pittsburgh defense at home is going to do a much better job against the run. I think Sam Darnold's going to get thrown into a lot of mistakes, and this is going to be a 2-0 start for the Steelers in a lower scoring game. I'm going to go Pittsburgh 18 to Seattle 13.
Yeah, a lot of my belief in this game just rests on the Seahawks defense. I really like what I saw out of their pass rush. Uchenna Nwosu, Derek Hall, DeMarcus Lawrence. I think those guys had a great impact against the 49ers. Just a few broken plays here and there by one specific player really ended up costing them the game. And I think that switches in this one. I think the Seahawks win 23-20.
X factor in this one, Chris Boswell. 6 field goals in this game. I'm calling it right now. The Boz is going to dominate this matchup.
Well, let's move on to probably the most anticipated game of the week. The Philadelphia Eagles are traveling to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. The Eagles favored by a point and a half on the road, Lewis. And here we go, the Super Bowl rematch from the Eagles and the Chiefs. The Chiefs a little different looking. No Rashi Rice. Xavier Worthy questionable to play in this game.
He's
And
not playing. I don't think so.
and that's just going to be the difference in this game, right? We saw the Chiefs, they're just different on offense this year. Can't really run the ball like we talked about in our recap episode. And then on the other side, the Eagles, the passing attack, nowhere to be seen at all. Just their same old ground and pound. The defense, we really can't put a button on it yet without seeing Jalen Carter, but they still have all the guys that we like. They still have Zach Bond, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. I see you shaking your head there a little bit.
We'll
But
get
against
into
this
it.
Chiefs team, I mean, it's hard to say that this Chiefs team is going to lose 2 games in a row, be down 0-2 to start the season. But the Eagles, the better roster, better mental fortitude, and I think they're going to go into Kansas City and win a close one.
Yeah, you could even argue the rest advantage, even though the Chiefs are at home would favor the Eagles, you didn't have to go all the way to Brazil and then just disappointing loss, right? A lot of, like you mentioned, metrics do favor the Eagles in this matchup. What I will say that does favor, a matchup that favors Kansas City in this game is I think their passing attack will be better in this game, right? Because you make a whole game plan probably all season long with the thing in mind, hey, Xavier Worthy's going to play against the Chargers, right? And then first drive, he's out. You're kind of throwing guys in on the fly, guys who maybe aren't too familiar with the scheme. Hollywood Brown really didn't play much at all last year, made an impact, and he kind of started going later in that game. The thing that would kind of concern me, you mentioned a lot of the guys that you can trust defensively for the Eagles. I mean, yes, Jalen Carter being in this game is a huge X factor. He's a top five defensive player in all of football, and he is extremely impactful, right? And especially now, he's definitely gonna be playing with a chip on his shoulder, considering how the events of last week went. Technically suspended for game two, but the service or the sentence was already served in week one. That was the exact lettering from the NFL. Makes sense. Um, but I am leaning Kansas City in this matchup. I just think Patrick Mahomes has never lost 3 games in a row in his career. This game being in Kansas City. I know the last time these two teams played in Kansas City, the Eagles did end up winning. And maybe you can just say the Eagles are just the kryptonite for the Chiefs, right? They just all the really bad matchups across the board. You can't handle the physicality of this Chiefs or this Eagles rushing attack or this Eagles offensive line. But it's just really hard for me to think the Chiefs are going to go 0-2. They just have way too much championship fortitude on this team. Despite, you could say the Eagles do too, right? Given their new medal. But yeah, I just think there's advantages in the passing game that the Chiefs are going to look a lot more professional. They're going to have a lot better a plan going forward. At home, there's going to be a lot more benefit for the whistle. They got a lot of pre-snap penalties, a lot of ticky-tack things. And for the Eagles side, I just think that it's really going to come down to is Jalen Hurts going to make big plays and big moments, and it's hard to say he won't. It's given his track history, especially against this team. Ultimately, this is just a belief in the Chiefs for me. I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this matchup. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I just think Mahomes has to put on the cape for this one. He's going to hopefully not lead the team in rushing, but I think his legs will definitely be an X factor in this game. Um, but I am going with Kansas City. I'm going to go Kansas City 31, Eagles 27.
Yeah, you're saying it's going to take a Mahomian effort to win this one, and I just don't think the Chiefs have it right now. Just the way their roster's built, the way their mental fortitude has been, losing these, back-to-back games in the Super Bowl and Week 1 against the Chargers. A lot of people think these two teams, especially the Eagles, want to ground and pound. I think this game will be won or lost by the arms of both of these quarterbacks. I expect a huge game out of Jalen Hurts. We saw Marion Hampton and the Chargers kind of struggle to run the ball. It was a lot of Justin Herbert, doing things on his own with his legs.
And
And
Jalen
then
Hurts is better than Justin Herbert throwing the ball.
if I mean, one could say that, based on his two Super Bowl performances that he's had. Um, but I think this is going to be won by Jalen Hurts' arm. I'm predicting 250 passing yards for him. I think AJ Brown, what do they say? The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and he is definitely a squeaky wheel. I think, and Dallas Goedert always there at the safety blanket. This is going to be a huge passing game for the Eagles. They're going to silence all the haters once again, and they win 24-20.
Definitely the most anticipated matchup of this week. I just can't wait to watch it. It really is going to be a huge litmus test for what do you got, Chiefs? Is this the end, or are we going to get back on the horse? I personally am going to put my faith in Mahomes, who's came in clutch for me more than he is not. But Laraib, let's move on to our next game. We have Sunday night football. The Atlanta Falcons traveling to Minnesota to play the Vikings. Both teams, or no, excuse me, Vikings 1-0, Falcons 0-1. Michael Penix, you know, had a pretty good effort in that game.
A Mahomian
Uh,
effort, you would say?
more like a Penixian effort, I would argue. Um, but ultimately couldn't get it done against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week. And then Minnesota looked like they just completely gave up on JJ McCarthy until he just willed them into a victory. Um, the big thing here for me is the trench play. I'm always going to start with that. I think that's the biggest thing early on in the season. I thought this Vikings offensive line, minus Christian Darrisaw, was really freaking impressive, especially in that second half, running the ball, protecting. They had the highest pass blocking grade of the entire week against a pretty formidable Bears defense. Montez Sweat, like you got some guys there, definitely more formidable than this Atlanta defensive front, which did a pretty decent job against the run, against Tampa Bay, who really wasn't very successful rushing the ball. But I think with an emphasis, Kevin O'Connell putting more emphasis on the running game in this one, I think they're going to try to establish that a lot more. Maybe get Jordan Mason involved a lot earlier in this game, having because clearly the way he was running the ball later in that game, it seemed like he's just the back with more juice in that backfield than Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, with the receiving touchdown, he still had his imprint on it. But getting this passing game involved, I think JJ McCarthy just building that confidence after the win is really going to help him. And Drake London questionable for this game. If he's a question mark, it's going to be definitely a difficult thing to pass on this Vikings defense. And ultimately, it comes down to this for me: Brian Flores against Michael Penix, and that is a terrifying matchup. If I'm Michael Penix, all the different switching and the movement before the ball is snapped. Penix is a pretty, one read type of guy. Like if Drake London's not open, he's kind of gets flustered. And I did like most of the use of his legs in that game, but this Vikings defense is going to cause a lot of problems in Minnesota. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game, and the team that I trust more to take care of the ball, to play safe, to run the ball, have more of a defensive run identity is the Vikings. So I'm going to go with the Vikings in this one.
Yeah, and I have to agree. And I think you really hit the nail on the head with Brian Flores matching up against the young second-year quarterback Michael Penix. Just his different blitz packages that he has, all the cover zeros. I think that's really gonna, fluster him in this big spot on Sunday Night Football. I, I really like Michael Penix, what he did last year, and he had a great start to week one. Drake London, I'm pretty sure will be playing in this game. Raheem Morris came out and said that, so that is good news for your fantasy team and my fantasy team in a different league. But he's going to be hyper targeted. But Kyle Pitts got really involved last week. We saw Bijan Robinson get really involved in the passing game. But I just think in a spot like this against this Vikings defense, it's gonna be a little bit too much for Michael Penix to handle. And then on the other side, I just want to see JJ McCarthy. He had a great second half against the Bears. Will they continue to build on that? Will they do a lot more play action? How much will work will Justin Jefferson continue to get? I really think this Vikings team, you know, built a lot of momentum, built a lot, their Super Bowl aspirations just continue to build, play after play in that second half against the Bears. In a huge spot like this, I think the Vikings win 24-21.
Yeah, ultimately, I need to see Atlanta win a big game, especially with Michael Penix as the starter. Honestly, I'd feel a little differently about this game if Kirk Cousins was the starter. Um,
Little
yeah,
revenge game.
little revenge game. We'll have a lot of that this week. But I just think that I don't know. I need to see it from Penix before I pick the Falcons. So I'm going with the Vikings in this game. I'm going to go Vikings 21, Atlanta 13. Let's move on now to Monday Night Football. We have two games. We're going to highlight one because I love the Monday Night Football doubleheaders. We'll get into that one later, probably next Tuesday. Starting off, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to Houston. Tampa is a 2.5 point underdog on the road here, Laraib. Not a lot that I liked out of Houston last week. Now, their defense is definitely the defense that we thought it was going to be, right? Derek Stingley looked pretty good. This defense, got a lot to the quarterback, causing a lot of havoc for Matt Stafford last week. But ultimately, that offense just looked anemic. Like no running game whatsoever. Just didn't really have an identity. The leading receiver, I couldn't even tell you. Well, I can tell you it
It
wasn't
wasn't
Nico
Nico
Collins. I
Collins.
can tell you that. But I don't. I just it seemed very confused. You had the new offensive coordinator previously with the Rams that you loved. He didn't really do much last. Well, they used Nico Collins in the slot. Yeah, that's what they did last year too. But I trust Tampa's offensive approach more. Now it does scare me that this Atlanta defensive front that you faced last week, this is a completely different defensive front, especially, Tristan Wirfs is still out. No Chris Godwin in this game still. Now, I really liked what I saw from Emeka Ibuka last week. If you know, you know. But against, a real outside corner, Stingley, Kyer Elam, this secondary, Jalen Petrie is just a much different animal than what you faced last week. And I just think that it's going to be a lower scoring game. But ultimately, I have to have more faith in Tampa. this offensive approach. Baker, he looked pretty solid last week. He just didn't really throw the ball that much, which was surprising. They tried really running the ball. I think that they're gonna have a better time running the ball this week. Um, we saw that Kyron Williams had some success on a lot of volume last week. And I think that, getting Bucky Irving a lot more involved, he got some good reps in the passing game. And I just trust Baker more in this spot, even though it's in Houston. I'm going to go Tampa in this matchup.
Yeah, I have to agree.
You have to.
Unfortunately, I mean, every single year of CJ Stroud's career, he has just regressed and regressed offensively. And you can't put the entire blame on him, especially with how they've constructed this offensive line. But at some point, we've seen guys like Joe Burrow handle a bad offensive line. We've seen guys like Patrick Mahomes handle a bad offensive line. And so, if he wants to, be on that level in the AFC, ultimately he has to figure something out. And on his second offensive coordinator in his third year in the league, it's just hard for me to trust them in this spot. Until we see something change, it's hard for me to pick them in a spot against a team like the Buccaneers, who defensively maybe not powerhouses, but they have guys out there who can make plays.
Consistent.
And then on the other side, like you mentioned, Baker Mayfield. Just another amazing fourth quarter comeback by him in a 2-minute drill against the Falcons. He just finds a way to win. And I think the Baker continues to bake in this one. I think the Buccaneers win at 20-17.
Yep. And I have the Buccaneers winning 23-20. Let's move on. That'll be all of our highlighted games of the week, but we still have a lot of football to discuss, Laraib. Let's go ahead and go back in time to the first game. We have the San Francisco 49ers traveling to New Orleans, my beautiful Saints, starting off 0-1, but a Niners team that already has been depleted by injuries. I need to figure out what's going on in that Niners training room. I mean, it's like they got me and you out there just stitching shit together. See, we're long enough into the podcast that come on, we can throw out a few words here and there. I still think Mac Jones is a good enough. If this was like a second round pick, rookie, making his first start, I would like the Saints in this matchup. But Mac Jones started a few games last year and actually looked pretty decent. He developed a pretty good chemistry with Brian Thomas last year, and I think he's capable enough. Kyle Shanahan, the quarterback whisperer. The Saints defensive front was pretty impressive last week, but I think definitely you're facing a different beast in this Niners offensive attack. Ricky Pearsall looked pretty good last week. I think he's going to have a good game, especially against, second year player Kool-Aid McKinstry, who really should have had a lot more gettable moments, but Kyler Murray is just not that accurate. I don't love picking the Niners in this matchup, but if there's any team that I would fade them against, it's the Saints. So I'm going with the Niners in a low scoring game, 20-13.
Yeah, just last second injury designation for Brock Purdy. No, not entirely clear what it is, shoulder or toe. Of course, Christian McCaffrey does not practice today on Wednesday. But like you mentioned, Mac Jones last year force feeding the ball to BTJ. I think he's gonna be force feeding the ball to Ricky Pearsall all afternoon against the Saints team, who quietly are being underrated. If the Cardinals are a little bit better than what we expected them to be, the Saints team, held in there. Juwan Johnson, sneaky good pickup at fantasy if you need help at tight end. So many targets for him. Chris Olave, of course, he's taken, shots all over.
Blue Tent is just ready
Uh,
for him.
24/7. Blue Tent is following him around. But like you mentioned, the 49ers get a new kicker this week in Eddie Pinheiro. I think that's ultimately going to be the difference. I think the 49ers win 20-17.
Yeah, as much as I'd love to pick the Saints here, can I see Rattler win a football game in the NFL first before I pick him? Until that happens, I'm going with the Niners as well. Next up, we have the New York Giants traveling to Dallas. Both teams 0-1. Dallas 5.5 point favorite here. And what are you leaning, Laura?
And I mean, I have to go with the Cowboys. They were really impressive on opening night. And as long as Russell Wilson is a starting quarterback for the New York Giants, I just can't pick that team. As great as their defensive line is, how close they were keeping that game against the Commanders last week, They still weren't able to overcome the, ineptitude of Russell Wilson at this point in his career. I think the Cowboys, a lot of people are underrating them, especially after their loss. I think if they catch a couple balls in this game or in that game against the Eagles, they're easily 1-0 in this spot at home in Jerry World for their first game of the year. That stadium will be rocking. I think the Cowboys win at 30-17.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laraib. I just think that I liked what the Cowboys did last week and trying to really emphasize the rushing game. Javonte Williams looked like he had some juice. And that was the big thing. The Giants just could not stop the run whatsoever. And the Commanders were kind of just doing whatever they wanted in the rushing attack. Not that effective, but what's the best way to silence a really active live pass rush? And that's running the ball. And I think that that's what the Giants are going to do. And again, I agree with you. If Russell Wilson's starting, this is just an inept offense, and we will be seeing Mr. Dart very soon, if not during this game. I'm going with the Cowboys as well, 33-20. Next game, we have the Los Angeles Rams traveling to Tennessee. Rams 5.5 point favorites on the road. I like the Rams in this one. Another just really tough matchup out of the gate for Cam Ward. And just getting bludgeoned all last week by the Broncos. It's not going to get any easier against this Rams formidable defensive front. I did like some of the things I saw from Cam Ward. He showed some poise and a lot of high leverage situations, but they just don't have the talent yet to really compete against some of these teams. And I think the offensive matchup for the Rams will be a lot easier against this Titans front. I mean, Bo Nix might just be an incompetent quarterback. I don't know. The jury's still out. I think Stafford is going to find a much better rhythm against this Titans pass rush. And then I just think they're going to be able to run the ball a lot more effectively than they were against Houston last week. Give me the Rams in this one, 31-23.
Yeah, I think this Titans defense is being severely underrated. You can harp on blow dicks all you want, but I just think the Titans have a solid unit defensively. I think the Rams offense is going to be not scoring as many points as you think they are, especially Kyron Williams. You can give him all the volume in the world, but
Volume.
Jeffrey Simmons will be eating that up in the interior of the defense. I think the Rams win this one. Like you mentioned, another hard test for Cam Ward. But given what he was playing against the Broncos, he looked impressive. But again, another spot with a great pass rush of Brandon Frisk and company. I think the Rams win this one 24-17.
All right, let's go on now. The New England Patriots host the Miami Dolphins. Or no, excuse me. They go to Miami to play the Dolphins. Dolphins 1.5 point favorites. Two teams with very disappointing starts. Who are you favoring in this matchup?
Call me crazy. I am favoring the home team in this one. I like the Miami Dolphins. They've been hearing so much of the chatter. They've been hearing so much of the noise. But I think Mike McDaniel back at home, this Patriots team who was severely overhyped this entire offseason, just did not look impressive to me. And this Dolphins team, a lot to prove back there in South Miami, where the sun will be beaming down on them. They're going to get a nice little vitamin C boost. And I think the Dolphins win this one. I think Tyreek Hill goes out there and shows why he should be traded to the Chiefs midseason.
I can't believe you, Laraib. I mean, after what we saw from the Dolphins last week, I am also picking the Dolphins this
What?
week. I have it written down. When we started, I was like, there's a team you're going to hate that I pick. And I agree with you. I think the Dolphins are going to win this game. A lot of the reasons you mentioned, I think New England team going down to Miami has always just been hell for these teams early on in the season. I really did not like what I saw from that Patriots offense. And I think a lot of people are going to overcorrect and say the biggest topic, and we even said it in our last episode, are the Dolphins the worst team in the NFL? Are they the worst team in the AFC? I don't think so. They have the talent. This Patriots offensive line did not look good. They were not able to run the ball. Drake May threw almost 50 attempts in his last game. I just think there's a huge get back here for the Dolphins. I don't feel good. Let me just preface everything. I don't like that I'm doing this. I have faith. I picked the Patriots to be a playoff team, and losing this game basically just puts a nail in their damn coffin. But I'm going with the Dolphins. They have too much talent, and if you have pride, damn it, you should win this game. I'm going to go Dolphins 23, Patriots 17. Again, I hate that you picked them too. I hate it. I
Yeah,
thought this was going to be the one.
this was supposed to be one of the ones where I was like, I got him here, but I guess not. I think we both agree. Maybe we are trying to be too sharp here,
I think we are.
and this is gonna be one where we're
Tuesday's going to be a
just
fun episode.
just
That's all I'll
scratching our
say.
heads. The text will be insane when we're watching this game. But yeah, I'm gonna pick the Dolphins 27-24 as they silence the haters.
All right, next up, we have another AFC East matchup. The Buffalo Bills traveling to the Jets. Jets looked pretty impressive in their debut against the Steelers. Buffalo still favored by 6.5. I mean, it's the Bills. Like, I'm now this is a trap if I've ever seen one before. Not like the Bills are playing some world beater next week. I don't know who the Bills are playing next week, to be honest with you. But coming off that wild emotional game where everyone the big feeling is, oh, the Bills are awesome, the Bills are great. They got ran all over by the Ravens last week. And this Jets offense looked pretty dynamic running the ball. Justin Fields, Breece Hall showed some juice. They had a lot of action. So this does scare me if I'm a Bills fan. And I think it's going to be a lot of Josh Allen again. But I'm not picking the Jets to beat the Bills. I'm going with the Bills in this one, 23-20. I think the Jets do cover. I think that's going to be a holy crap, Josh Allen save us. And I think he will.
And I don't think he will. I think Justin Fields and Aaron Glenn have formed a symbiotic relationship. Someone who finally believes in Justin Fields. You said it yourself. This is the spot for a team like the Buffalo Bills to fall completely flat on their ass going to New York. We've seen this movie before. I love the Jets in this spot. I'm letting it all hang this week. I told you I had something crazy in the bag. This is it right here. If Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson can run all over this Bills team, I think the Jets can do exactly the same. Really, really impressed with their offensive line. With no Elijah Vera Tucker out there, they played outstanding still. Armand Membu, you know, they don't let offensive linemen win, rookie of the years, but he was really impressive against TJ Watt. Now against this Bills pass rush, which was anemic against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. This is just a huge spot for a huge upset. I think the Jets at home put on a statement in what is going to be another high scoring game, but I like the Jets to win 34-31.
Ah, man, you know what, kudos, good for you because that was the lean that I've been feeling, but I can't get there. So the fact you went there, I'm happy. So that's a 1-0. All right, next on up, you think you're crazy. We have the Browns traveling to Baltimore. Both teams 0-1. Browns put up a good fight against the Bengals last week. And if we think the Bengals are a good team, what does that say about the Browns? 11 and a half point underdogs, Laraib. Who do you got here?
You gotta pick the Ravens. I mean, if they find a way to lose, this is exactly what we said last year too, by the way. If they find a way to lose to this Raiders team, it's over.
Was
But
it
I
over?
mean, Bazooka Joe still has it. 300 yards against the Bengals last week. Now you get this really bad Ravens secondary with Jair Alexander out there.
Oh,
Uh, giving up
woof.
100 yards. Just a unit that who has all the names out there, but just for some reason can't figure it out. But Lamar Jackson at home against this bad Browns team, I like the Ravens to win at 30-17.
I think it's going to be a lot more low scoring than you think. I obviously I'm going with the Ravens in this one.
No,
Um,
no, let me see
no,
you
I'm
go
not
crazy.
because you did that last stunt. That doesn't mean I'm going to follow. Um, But I do think the Browns are going to make this competitive game. They're just going to be a tough out. I think they have a very underrated defense. I think Kevin Stefanski is a really good head coach who's not going to make a lot of mistakes, right? The Browns, I mean, the kicker was just awful. I don't know how they haven't given up on him yet. Um, but there's a lot of things, Ravens just shoot themselves in the foot. And it would not surprise me if the Ravens were up 20-10 in this game. Bazooka Joe comes out, throws a touchdown, and it's, uh-oh, here we go again. But I will say, I think John Harbaugh, big contentious point in our last episode, if he learns from his mistakes at his antiquated age. I think the Ravens should pull this one out against the Browns. I'm going to go 23. I'm going to go 20 to 17. Ravens eke out a victory against the Browns. Next up, we have the Colts hosting the Broncos. Denver, 1.5 point favorite on the road, Laraib. I'm going to go ahead and start with this one. I'm going with the Broncos. This Colts hype has gotten a little too rich for me. They lightning in the bottle. I won't even say lightning in the bottle. They had a very good game plan against the Dolphins. They made the Dolphins look like amateurs. And we both think the Dolphins are going to beat the Patriots this week. So what does that say about the Colts? Not much. I think, I saw this last year. Derek Carr looked amazing in his first 2 weeks, and then, he found water finds its level. I think this Broncos defense is a much more formidable unit than the Dolphins defense was last week. I think that Daniel Jones with a pass rush with expectations, nevertheless, is a much different quarterback than the Daniel Jones we saw last week. And I'm going to pick the Broncos to win an ugly, low scoring game. These games between the Broncos and the Colts usually suck. I think this game is going to suck. I'm going to go Broncos 16, Colts 7.
Yeah, I just think the Colts got to exploit that weak secondary of the Dolphins last week, but it's certainly not going to be the case this week with PS2 and then the pass rush with Nick Bonito and Derek Wolfe. I think Daniel Jones is in for a rude awakening. Now, if this Colts team finds a way to put huge, gaudy numbers on the board against the Broncos,
I'll be moved.
all the credit in the world to Shane Steichen because you know that is none of Daniel Jones is doing. But I think this is a big spot for the Broncos. Bo Nix, after being hyped up all season long by Sean Payton, really fell flat with 3 turnovers in week one. Now they're on the road once again against the Colts, but I think that never mind, not again on the road on the road for the first time this year. I just think they continue to build some rapport. RJ Harvey, please get some more workload in this one. I think the Broncos win 24-17.
All right, next up we have the Carolina Panthers traveling to Arizona to face the Cardinals. Cardinals 6.5 point favorites. I really did not like what I saw last week out of Kyler. I think it's the same old Kyler, but it's also the same old Panthers. I think the Cardinals blow this crappy Panthers team out here. I was very impressed with this Cardinals defense. I think they got a lot of pressure. They did a really good job of, kind of stopping the run. Now it's the Saints and Spencer Rattler. You're not facing some world beaters, but I like what Jonathan Gannon's really building over there. They have Will Johnson looked very impressive in the secondary, and I think against this depleted Carolina receiving room, it's going to be a lot on Bryce Young to make difficult throws, holding the ball, and that's when the mistakes are going to happen. And I just think Kyler maybe he gets a little bit of encouragement going up against a better defense. I think they're going to be able to run the ball all over this Panthers front, and I like the Cardinals in a total blowout. I'm going to go Cardinals 28 to Panthers 13.
Yeah, it's just hard to pick this Panthers team in this spot. They bring in Ted McMillan, who maybe didn't show the greatest, the greatest stat sheet, but it was still, serviceable. But then, Xavier Legette does not seem to have that year two
He
leap.
doesn't have it.
Hunter Renfro ping-ponging around the
Holy
league, finally
hell.
found a spot in Carolina with Jalen Coker on IR. It's just hard for me to pick this Panthers team in a spot like this once again on the road going to Arizona. The Cardinals, like you mentioned, Will Johnson, really impressive. A guy who was supposed to be a first round pick slipped into the early second round, and it really looks like the Cardinals hit on somebody there. And then for Kyler Murray and this rushing attack, can you be halfway decent against a bad Panthers team? I think the Cardinals win 30-17.
Trey Benson. Look out for him to have a sneaky game here. And then finally we have the second half of the Monday Night Football doubleheader that starts at 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Damn. Just want to emphasize how ridiculous that is. Anyway, Chargers are 3.5 point favorites against the Raiders. Raiders with a pretty impressive showing last week, albeit I think against a bad team, the Patriots. I just think this Raiders defense is still not good. They just played a pretty anemic Patriots offense. And now going up against a formidable offense and the Chargers with Justin Herbert, uh, I think that the Chargers will be able to establish a running game And really, I think you're going to see a lot of good things from Marion Hampton this week. I think that the Chiefs still have a very good rushing defense. Now, the long break, you go from playing on a Friday all the way to a Monday. I think that's going to really favor the Chargers in this matchup. And, I really did like what I saw from Geno. I think he's poised, a new offense, but going up against this Chargers defense and Jesse Minter, who, really caused Patrick Mahomes and offense a lot of problems. I think they're going to do the same. I didn't love what I saw from the rushing attack with Genty. Um, I think too many matchups here favor the Chargers.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, this Chargers pass rush was kind of nowhere to be seen in that Chiefs game. Mahomes had plenty of time to sit back in the pocket. It was really the rush defense I was impressed with. So if you try to put a lot on Geno's shoulders in this one, he might have a hard time. But on the other side, I just think Justin Herbert is on a mission this year. A lot of people had their eyes open last week, but my eyes have been open. I think he continues to ball in this one. It's the Chargers, it's the Raiders. This game will find a way to be close in the fourth quarter somehow, some way. But I think the Chargers, they have put the skeletons deep into the closet. They find a win. They find a way to win this one. I think they win 34-28.
All right, well, that's going to do it and I'll just say I have the Chargers winning 31-26. But that's going to do it for all of our week 2 NFL picks. But before we go, we have our locks, upsets, and best bets of the week. And because you went first last week, I'll go first with our upsets. And I am picking I totally forgot my
The
upset.
Commanders, who are playing tomorrow
That's
night.
right. That's right. Uh, like we mentioned, we did our Thursday night preview, or I should have mentioned this at the top. We did our Thursday night preview in our last episode. So if you want to see what we think about that, this will be dropping on Thursday. So I did pick the Commanders to be my upset. I just think that Packers team, a lot of hype, a lot of gas coming their way. Commanders a little more established, given the success last year. I think Jaden has another statement game to go along with just his ascending stardom, and I think they make a big statement here and pull off the upset.
And for my upset, I'm going with the New York Jets. I think this is a huge spot for them at home against the Bills. We've seen this show many times before. The Bills just did not impress me defensively last week. Expect a huge game out of Justin Fields and this rushing attack. If this Jets defense can step up even a little bit, guys like Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner playing to the level that we know they can, I think the Jets are in for a massive win.
All right, Robin, what is your lock of the week?
It has to be the Arizona Cardinals. Maybe not the greatest performance week 1 against the New Orleans Saints, but guess what? They get to play the Carolina Panthers at home. I think they easily win this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a great lock. That would have been my pick, but I'm going with another NFC North team. Actually, that has no connection. I am going with the Detroit Lions. Really upsetting loss in the first game. A little revenge against their old offensive coordinator. I think Dan Campbell rallies the troops and they flex that Detroit muscle that we've seen the past few years. I'm like the Lions as my lock this week. And then finally, best bets of the week, Laraib. For me personally, I just think that this Seahawks Steelers game, I really like the under here at 39 and a half. Just didn't really like what I saw from the Seahawks offense last week. And then I know the Steelers picked them in an under, giving you some war flashbacks, but I think the Steelers offense comes a little bit more down to earth. I think Aaron Rodgers plays more of a passing, control the game type of game script. There's a chance DK Metcalf gets exited in the first quarter, but I like the under 39 and a half.
And for my best bet, I'm going to go with Denver -1.5. I just think way too many people believe this Colts team actually has something to show us. I have to disagree. And especially in this spot against this Broncos defense, I think they can easily cover this.
All right, Laura. Well, that's going to do it for all of our week 2 action. We are super excited to get another beautiful week of NFL football. After how amazing last week was, we cannot wait to see what the NFL has in store for us upcoming. But, Laura, you got anything else for us before we get out of here today?
No, I think that's the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.